at the forefront of politics.
Our enemy is Trump. He is the enemy. We gotta unite. If we're not a united party, we lose to Trump.
On the front lines of activism.
There's certain fights, if we don't engage, they win. This is a fundamental question of who we are.
And delivering your daily dose of comedy.
Donald Trump, when he had his physical, they had his blood pressure, and mine is higher than his. Oh. And the irony is mine is higher because of him.
From the blue wave.
We flipped. Enough seats to take control of the House. We control the House.
To 2020 and beyond. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to the show, brothers and sisters. Monday, December 30th. I'm Dean Obeidallah. The last live show of the year, but I still want to be your MBFF because I am the neediest Muslim you'll ever meet. Looking forward to a big 2020 for all of us. We'll be off the next 2 nights, but back January 2nd to kick off the new year, to look forward to what I'm going to predict is going to be politically a great year for us. And I hope personally it is as well for all of us. But politically, I will say that. And I will say, and this is interesting because I wrote another article, I write weekly for CNN, and when I write about Trump, the Trump supporters get so angry they send me grammatically incorrect, horribly misspelled emails with their anger in it. And I don't think the Trumpers get this. When they send me angry emails, let me repeat, every time I piss off a Trump supporter, an angel gets their wings, okay? So I'm happy. I'm glorious at their anger. Hashtag triggered. It brings me joy. It shouldn't bring me joy. I'm not a cruel person, but it brings me joy. And because I'm not writing ridiculous things, I'm writing things for CNN based in reality. In any event, it's the last live show of the year, and I really wish we could have started off tonight with something more upbeat and fun, but fate had something else in store, and I feel compelled to talk about the horrific anti-Semitic terror attack that happened over the weekend, and also what's been an alarming trend in a spike of anti-Semitic deadly attacks on our Jewish sisters and brothers in this country. And I am not blaming Donald Trump for these attacks, but I will say bluntly that Trump's campaign and his presidency has been designed to pit Americans against each other. No one could deny that. Based on religion, race, ethnicity, immigration status, sexual gender identity, sexual orientation, and the list goes on. And when you unleash hate, it is impossible to contain. When you mainstream and embolden hatred and say it's good to demonize groups because of their race or religion, and the list goes on, it has a way of getting out of control. And that's what we're seeing right here. Now, I want to play the news clip if you didn't catch all things. It's been updated during the day about the attack that happened over the weekend in Muncie, New York. Here's clip number 1.
We are learning more about that gruesome attack at a rabbi's home this weekend in New York. The suspect now facing federal hate crime charges. According to new court documents, 37-year-old Grafton Thomas allegedly burst into the packed home Saturday night during a Hanukkah celebration and started stabbing and slashing people with a machete. 5 people were injured and they suffered slash wounds, a severed finger, even a skull fracture. Thomas allegedly fled while a witness followed him, taking note of the car that he was driving. New York City police officers later stopped that car in Manhattan, where they say that Thomas was found covered in blood with a strong smell of bleach coming from the car. Police say they found the machete and a knife inside the vehicle. Court documents say that officials also found handwritten journals at Thomas's home that contained anti-Semitic writings.
So, at first the reports, it was unclear what had happened other than there was an attack targeting Hasidic Jewish community in Muncie, New York. And if you're not from the area, Muncie, New York is known throughout this area of having a high concentration of Hasidic Jews. And because the family members for Mr. Thomas were saying he had mental illness. And that's, I have no doubt that's true. And that's part of the world you live in. Like the MAGA bomber who was sending bombs to the people Donald Trump went after had mental illnesses as well. But when you hear a drumbeat of hate directed against a group and you combine that with mental instability, it could lead to this. Now, just so it's very clear, overwhelmingly, people who have mental illness are the victims of crimes, not the ones perpetrating it. But every now and then, this does happen. So we're finding out more about Mr. Thomas, who was arrested. They are saying that at first it almost seemed like it was a mental illness case, but now it's much more clear. He's charged with federal hate crimes today. They found handwritten journals. The complaint signed by the FBI agent said that he had looked online for things about Hitler and the Jews. He had searched German Jewish temples and Zionist temples in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and Staten Island online. And then there was more here about what they found. So everyone's up to date on it. Here's clip number 2.
A lot of chilling new details. First, I'll talk about a little bit more information about what happened in the rabbi's home. According to the complaint, he said no one is leaving. And then there was a little bit more information about what officials were able to retrieve in the suspect's car, which was found about 30 minutes away from here in Manhattan. They found a machete as well as a knife, and both of those weapons were bloodstained. Also, during the search, when they obtained the search warrant in the suspect's home, originally we were reporting there were no visible signs of anti-Semitism, but after more thorough investigation and after combing through some of his belongings, there was a journal that included anti-Semitic sentiments. There was writing in there, and I'll just quote. It says, "Hebrew Israelites took from the powerful people." A phone was also recovered as well as part of the investigation, and in the internet browser, there were searches like, "Why did Hitler hate the Jews?"
So this attack happens on the last night of Hanukkah. And just a few weeks ago in New Jersey, not that far from where this attack took place, to be honest, within an hour drive, there was an attack on a kosher market, a deadly attack. 3 people killed and it was not completely clear they were motivated by the Hebrew Israelite philosophy or not, but they were certainly had dabbled in it, and that's not inherently a terrorist group. But it seems to play a role perhaps in these two. It's not 100% clear right now. They're trying to figure that out. But what we do know about the attack in New Jersey, the Attorney General of New Jersey said very clearly, based on their investigation, that the couple that killed the 3 Jewish people in the kosher market were focused on killing Jews. And, imagine you're in the Jewish community and you're going through this now. Because being a progressive means putting yourself in the shoes of others. It means about compassion and empathy. Think about it if within the last few weeks, people in your community were targeted for their faith, let's say, or for no faith if you're an atheist, and people were killing them. And it's not this alone, because while this was not getting national press, in New York, there was some press going on here about, in the last few days alone, every day of Hanukkah, there was an anti-Semitic hate crime. Not murder, thankfully, and not horrible violence, but still hate crimes. On December 23rd, a 28-year-old man punched and kicked a 65-year-old Jewish man in Midtown Manhattan while yelling anti-Semitic slurs. The man was arrested and charged with assault. On Thursday, just a few days ago, an Orthodox woman walking with her 3-year-old son in Brooklyn was approached from behind by a woman, 42-year-old woman named Ayanna Logan, who was arrested, yelling, "You effing Jews, your end is coming near." And she was arraigned on assault charges. The next day, and this is all making press in New York City, a 30-year-old woman slapped 3 Orthodox Jewish women in the face in Brooklyn. In the last year, there's been a 21% increase in anti-Semitic hate crimes. In the last few weeks, 17%. But it's not just this. In November, a white supremacist terrorist was plotting to blow up a beautiful historic synagogue in Colorado. He was arrested. It got a little press, not even national press. And when you look through the last year, what's happened? We've seen the worst anti-Semitic terrorist attacks in the history of this nation. Last October of 2018, the Tree of Life Synagogue, where a man who was a white supremacist, who wrote about invaders, calling immigrants invaders, and we know where that language comes from, went in and killed 11 Jews because he blamed them for bringing immigrants, especially Muslim immigrants and Latino immigrants, to this country. And he cited the caravan, the very caravan Donald Trump had been slamming and talking about a short time before that. That was its own attack. In April of this year, another synagogue was targeted by a man yelling anti-Semitic hate. A young white guy walked into the Powell, California Shabbat, killed 1 person, wounded others before being stopped. And look, hate is hate. And I've tried to make this point all the time on this show. When I've talked about when it's directed at my community, the Muslim community, the people who hate Muslims or hate Jews tend to hate others as well. In fact, in I've written about this. The number 1 and 2 victims of hate crimes in terms of religion is almost invariably either Muslims or Jews, and the other group is closely behind. And as you will find, people who tend to hate minorities don't just hate one. It's not what it is. They hate a lot of them. They're bigots. They're racist. It's part of their mindset. So today they might be targeting a synagogue. Tomorrow might be a black church. The day after that, a Sikh temple or a Muslim mosque. This is what they're about. Or immigrants and Latinos in an El Paso shopping mall. Folks, this is not a coincidence. We've never seen this. Tell me where you've seen this many hate crimes, and you can't, because statistically, we have not had this before. In the last 2.5 years since Donald Trump kicked off his candidacy, and again, I'm not specifically saying he had anything to do with this man who went into this and attacked people celebrating Hanukkah. What I am saying is something that I've written about and said for 2.5 years, for 3 years, 3.5 years, when Trump was running for office, when he said, quote, "I want a total and complete shutdown on Muslims entering the United States," close quotes. I wrote articles saying every religious minority should be wary of that because this is hate. And when you can openly hate a minority faith, there's no limit to that. You can't contain that. You've said it's okay. That guy goes on to be the GOP nominee and president of the United States. And he called for a total and complete shutdown on all Muslims simply because of Muslims' faith coming to this country. Same way he wants to ban transgender Americans. Transgender Americans want to serve in our military simply because of their gender identity. The message you're sending is that these are bad people. And the list goes on with Donald Trump. Hate doesn't happen in a vacuum. It cannot be contained once unleashed. That's the reality. That's the world we are all navigating through right now. There's a reason we've seen a spike in hate crimes, of personal attacks. It's gone down last year in property attacks, but not in personal attacks. It's not a coincidence that the worst anti-Semitic terrorist attack, deadly terrorist attack in the history of the United States of America happened last year by a man who blamed Jews for bringing immigrants to this country, calling them invaders. In fact, today, in the middle of this, when communities are reeling still and the Jewish community is in pain, acting Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security Ken Cuccinelli tries to use the anti-Semitic terrorist attack to continue to demonize immigrants. He tweets about the attack with an article to the attack, although this is not in this article, so no one knows where he got it from. But Ken Cuccinelli, on his verified Twitter account, where it says Acting Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, tweets about the attacker who went to the temple, or to attack the Jews in Muncie, New York, said, quote, "The attacker is the U.S. citizen son of an illegal alien who got amnesty under the 1986 amnesty law for illegal immigrants. Apparently, American values do not take hold among this entire family, at least this one violent and apparently bigoted son," close quotes. Can you believe this? A member of the Trump administration is using Twitter to try to stir up hate of immigrants, even the guy was born in America, the guy who did the attack, but going backwards saying he's the son of an undocumented immigrant, which we don't even know if that's true, honestly, because no one knows. But he works for the administration, so he probably had this. And while Trump is tweeting out nice things, I have zero doubt that Ken Cuccinelli is tweeting what Trump wants, because Trump controls the messaging of this administration. And this is quintessential Stephen Miller, Donald Trump stuff. Using a terrorist attack, using a tragedy to try to score political points, to try to help the argument that we can't let any immigrants in because maybe one of their sons or daughters down the road is going to commit a horrible attack. Meanwhile, the guy who did the attack was born in the United States of America. And then Trump advisor Franklin Graham, who's just vile, an anti-Muslim bigot, anti-LGBTQ bigot, was on Fox and Friends, and guess who he blamed for the attack today? Us, liberals. I'm not kidding, I'm going to play it. He blamed the critics of Donald Trump for spewing so much hate in this country. That's why this man went into a Hanukkah festival and tried to kill Jewish Americans. Here's clip number 3.
Now, the governor wants to have more laws. He's talking about he wants to enforce the law. Well, and all of that is good. But none of these laws are going to be able to change the human heart. And we see a lot of hatred in the country, and there's also political hatred. The hatred that we see for Donald Trump is incredible. And the governor, who's behind the microphone, has been responsible for some of this hatred toward people from the other party. And we as Americans, we've got to come together and work together to build this country so that we can go forward. We're just going to tear ourselves apart with this hatred.
And that's Franklin Graham, a man who's not only an advisor, but a dogged defender of Donald Trump, a man whose entire campaign strategy was to pit Americans against each other. That was it. You can't deny it, folks. That's what he did. Immigrants, Muslims, even as president, continuing on demonizing African Americans, using white supremacist language like they have low IQ, unintelligent, dumb, calling Africa an S-hole country. This is Trump's playbook. And Franklin Graham, we have to unite. And it's us. He's speaking about this terrorist attack and saying somehow because we criticize Donald Trump's bigotry and sexism, that somehow we contribute to this climate. This is the gaslighting. Even a man who is a Christian, in air quotes, as I put it, because I don't believe he's a Christian at all, not in the sense of Jesus Christ's teachings, that's for sure, that they would defend the indefensible. And it continues. When I talk about, and I want to read one quote from Elizabeth Warren over the weekend, which I think sums it up so well. And I was so happy she said this on the campaign trail in Iowa in response to the attack, the anti-Semitic attack. She said, quote, "Donald Trump has tried to stir up hate and division in our country. You can never draw the line straight from one place to another, but he has embraced hatred and unkindness among our people in ways that put Americans at risk," close quotes. Absolutely correct. By embracing hatred and kindness, which I also call cruelty, it unleashes it. And again, Donald Trump's not legally responsible for this attack. He might not even be morally responsible for this specific one in New York on the Jewish Americans. But this is the climate. There's a reason why we've seen a spike in hate crimes against Muslims, Jews, African Americans, Latinos, and the LGBT community. It's not a coincidence. Those are the people Donald Trump has gone after. This is the world we're living in. And when I talk about this, and I've said this over and over, I don't talk about the risk of violence against us to scare people. I say it to prepare people. Because we have to be ready to stand up for each other's communities when they come after us. That's why we must stand and help the Jewish American community against this form of hatred. That is unreal. This is off the charts. This is breaking records in the worst possible way. Dr. Martin Luther King has a quote that I love, where he said, "History will have to record that the greatest tragedy was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people." And if there's ever a time for us to speak up as good people, this is it. It's in the time of Trump against bigotry. When they come for one of us, they come for all of us. We have to be there for each other. We are minorities, if you are a minority. Hence the term minority. We're a small part of a majority. We could be overwhelmed if we were alone. Edmund Burke had another quote, which I like, and my friend Rabbi Mark Schneer always quotes Edmund Burke. He said, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing." If we do nothing, it's not our community, it doesn't matter. They win. Because this is not going to be, and this is the worst part of this, since 1992, in every presidential year, in the year of a presidential election, because of impassioned feelings and people fighting for their candidate, there's been a spike in hate crimes. There's no doubt. Trump didn't invent that. It happened in 2015-16. It usually doesn't continue afterwards. That's what's unique to see 3 years in a row of increased spike in personal hate crimes against people. That is off the charts. FBI's not seen that before. My point is, we're going to see worse. I don't know what we're going to see. I have no idea what 2020 is going to bring us. We have to be there for each other. We have to prepare for the worst. Whatever that might be, things we cannot even contemplate. Who would think a man would walk in to a celebration of the Hanukkah with a machete to kill people? Or a year ago, a man would walk into a synagogue and kill 11 Jewish people because he held them responsible for the invasion of immigrants coming to this country. Or a guy would go in El Paso, Texas shopping mall and kill countless Latinos because he viewed them as invaders. None of us are safe in this climate unless maybe if you're a rich, white, conservative, evangelical, straight Christian male, I think you're probably safe. But the rest of us are not safe. This is the world we live in. And, it's the last day of the new year, and I'm hoping next year is going to bring much more joy, but it's going to bring some pain. We're going to have more spikes in hate crimes. We're going to have acts of terrorism by white supremacists and others who are, because this man clearly not a white supremacist, he's black, but hate doesn't know limits, although there is a pattern in a spike in white supremacist hate crimes that we've seen. So is it fair? We'll take a break and come back, and we have a lot of great guests tonight. My friend Ari Gordon, who's one of the co-directors of the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, and he's also part of AJC, is going to join us for a little bit to talk about the Jewish community's response at the top of the hour. And then a candidate for Congress is joining us, and Rick Unger is going to join us, talk about politics, a lot of things to cover politically. But I'd love to hear from you. I mean, especially if you're Jewish, what are your feelings as you see this spike in hate crimes? Is it alarming you? Is it something that you think, well, this is life now in 2019, 2020, America? Is it something that scares you for your children? If you have Jewish friends, what are their concerns? What do you hear from them? And do you, like I and Senator Warren, say, look, you cannot discount the climate that we live in, which is by design Donald Trump's to divide us? Yeah, people didn't like Obama. They thought he was divisive because he talked about issues to help people. He was not trying to divide Americans. Donald Trump is literally trying to divide Americans. I just wrote about for CNN before this, yesterday, even in the books that President Obama has this recommended book list that just came out. These books are all to make you smarter and more worldly and informed. And then I went through the books Donald Trump has recommended on his Twitter feed in the last year. Without exception, they are about him, and they're generally attacking us, lying liberals, the idea that we're trying to destroy America. Those are the books that he's promoting. Deep state, everything about him, everything to divide. His Twitter feed tells you that. Donald Trump's, how many times has he tweeted 90% approval among Republicans? He only cares about his base. He even divides that. We're not fellow Americans to Donald Trump. We are obstacles to his dream of being an authoritarian. So let's take a break. I'd love to hear from you. 866-997-4748. 866-997-4748. You're my guest right at the top of the hour. I'd love to hear from you right after this break.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
Whoever's the next president, we should call him the 45th president of the United States.